But welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see that you were able to make it out with us this morning. And as we look back at what we've been doing, we started out. We did talk about be a Barnabas, right? The son of encouragement was Barnabas. We looked at what kind of personality he was. How even though his name doesn't appear on any of the New Testament books, because he was such an encourager, such a builder of other people, the people that he influenced are the ones who have written over 60% of the New Testament. We've moved forward from that. We've moved forward from how we can be an encourager, how we can build the kingdom of God, even though we may not think that we're doing anything directly. And we've looked at and moved into a time of Thanksgiving. So the last few weeks, as we have been in this time of Thanksgiving, this is what we have been focusing on. Now, I'm going to look at just a little bit different angle of Thanksgiving this morning, but we're still staying with the same theme. We're going to talk about remembering God's goodness. And we're going to look at Deuteronomy, at a passage, at a sermon that Moses gave to the children of Israel after they had been wandering in the wilderness for a long time and they were getting ready to go into the promised land. And then we're going to move forward into one of the greatest expressions of praise and thanksgiving in the Bible, and that is in Salmos 103. We'll see a repeating theme in Salmos 103, but we're only going to look at like the first 3 or 4 verses, and then I'll back up and we'll look at the overview of the whole thing. So I got to get the right one of these to click or else my slide won't move. There we go. So I'm going to start off with this. I'll read it in English, and then let's see, who looks like a good reader this morning? Luce, you do good at reading for us, so I'll ask you to read for us after that in Spanish. So first in English. When you have eaten and are satisfied, praise the Lord your God for the good land he has given to you. Be careful that you do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you today. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all that you have is multiplied, I'm going to leave us in suspense right there. Go ahead and read in Spanish.
Cuando hayas comido y te hayas saciado, alabarás al Señor tu Dios por la buena tierra que te ha dado. Ten cuidado de no olvidarte del Señor tu Dios. No dejes de cumplir sus mandamientos, sus normas y sus decretos que hoy te mando. No sea que, cuando comas y te sacies, cuando edifiques buenas casas y las habites, cuando se aumenten tus vacas y tus ovejas y se acrecienten tu plata y tu oro y tengas abundancia de todo.
All right, so otherwise, it says, then your heart will become proud. You'll forget the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He led you through the vast and dreadful wilderness, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of the hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness, something your ancestors had never known, to humble and test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. You might say to yourself, my power and my strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me.
Te vuelvas orgulloso y te olvides del Señor tu Dios, que te sacó de Egipto, de la tierra donde viviste como esclavo. Te condujo por el inmenso y terrible desierto, lleno de serpientes y escorpiones, tierra ardida y sin agua. Él hizo que brotara agua de la roca más dura. En el desierto te alimentó con maná, comida que jamás habían conocido tus antepasados. Así te humilló y te puso a prueba, para que al final te fuera bien. Tal vez digas, esta riqueza es fruto de mi poder y de la fuerza de mis manos.
But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant, which he swore to your ancestors as it is today.
Pero recuérdate del Señor tu Dios, porque Él te da el poder para producir esa riqueza. Así confirma hoy el pacto que juró a tus antepasados.
All right, amen. So let's think for just a second. Let's look at the context that this came out of. And from there, we want to bring it forward into today. So this story occurs after Moses has taken the children, or led the children of Israel out of slavery, out of the land of Egypt. Now, the people that he led out had been in slavery all their lives. In truth, the children of Israel had been in slavery in Egypt for over 400 years. So not only did they only know a life of slavery, so did their fathers, so did their grandfathers, so did anybody that they remembered from far back enough to even have oral stories that they told. So their entire mentality and entire culture had been formed around being slaves in Egypt at this time. So when Moses brought these people out, they didn't immediately celebrate their freedom. They didn't immediately recognize how good that God was to them. And so when you read through the story in the book of Exodus and the other books, the first 5 books of the Bible there, it almost becomes a story of, wow, how can you be complaining? Did you not remember what it was like back in Egypt? And so it was that these people were so much in a mindset of bondage that God was not able to take them into a place of freedom, into the land that he had promised them. In fact, they spent all of their time complaining, and Moses got very frustrated with them a few times in the story, as you've read it. So they didn't have water. He even called water from the rock. They didn't have anything to eat. He had even gave them manna, something that nobody else had ever known. A bread from heaven, if you would, straight from the hand of God. They were able to eat from this, and they were able to be satisfied. But always their hearts turned back to where they came from, just because they had never known anything else. And so it was that God decided that he could not take that generation into the promised land. So they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Now, after 40 years, most of the people that have been brought up out of Egypt, they are dead and they are gone. But now they are about to enter into the promised land. Now, Moses would like to have entered with them, but Moses was disobedient along the way. And so God told him that he also would not be allowed to enter. However, Moses is telling them and preparing them in this sermon as he talks to them what their attitudes need to be toward God as they come into the land they are about to enter into. Okay, and so he is telling them that you will go in and your hearts are going to be satisfied. Why? Because you're going to know a plentiful existence like you have never known before. You're going to, and he describes this land as a land flowing with milk and honey. And so he's told them several times that you're going into this land flowing with milk and honey. Now, of course, not literally. What he's talking to them about is this is a land of plenty. This is a land where everything that you need is going to be provided, and it's going to be more than just that. Because milk and honey, these are not the basics of life. These are things that you really enjoy, things that go beyond just basic subsistence. But he's telling them that this is going to be the kind of life, the kind of land that you are entering into. So things are about to change for you. But now be careful about your heart, because what happens to you when you enter into a place where you're satisfied for a long time? Well, your heart can turn away from God. You can become complacent. You can forget who brought you up out of Egypt, where you came from, and where you are now. And so this becomes what Moses is giving them warning about. Now we have a saying for this kind of an attitude or this kind of thing in the U.S. We talk about foxhole religion. Okay, now there are a number of metaphors around this. So when we talk about wartime, there's some, I don't really think they're jokes because they're not that funny. But one of the things that is said is that, there are no atheists in a foxhole. And why is that? Because when your life's on the line, people start reaching out to God. People start praying to God. Okay? But foxhole religion goes a little bit beyond this. What foxhole religion refers to in the United States is that when nothing is going right, when people are in desperate situations and they start to cry out to God, saying, God, save me. But it doesn't just start out by saying, God, save me. It goes a little bit farther. People start to make all kinds of promises at that point, like, oh, God, if you just get me out of this, I'll become a minister. I'll become a missionary. God, if you just get me out of this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to, start making all kinds of promises to God if only God will deliver them from that difficult situation that they are in. So it's easy for us to find humility then. It's maybe easy for Thanksgiving, but you're probably worried about something else, probably worried about life and limb during the time that you're in these kinds of situations. But then what happens as soon as the person gets delivered, as soon as they get out of that situation? Well, quite often, what happens? They forget. They forget that they made promises to God. Now, I don't necessarily think it's good. It's good to start making a lot of promises that you probably can't keep or haven't thought about during times of difficulty. Although that is human nature, because we are in need at that point, and so we are desperately seeking a way out. But once then we get back into our comfortable place, we forget everything, and our life goes back to the way it is. Now, I don't want us to think that we always have to live life the way that we are when we're in the foxhole or when we're in that very desperate situation. In fact, it's not like that at all. We'll look at that in just a little bit. But the whole point here is that we should not forget God after the situation, the desperate situation, has passed. We do, in fact, seek God in hardships. It's natural. That is the only person, the only place that we know of where we can turn to for help, where we can turn to for comfort, and we become keenly aware of our need for God during these times of difficulty. So we seek God diligently. That's just what hardship does for us. But not all of life is hardship, and Jesus recognized this as well. And so, speaking from the other side, Jesus was dealing with the religious people of his time, and we refer to those commonly as people like the Pharisees, the priests, and so on, like this. And constantly they were jealous of Jesus. Constantly they were testing Jesus. They were not testing him to see if he was true. What they were really doing is testing him, trying to trip him up. And so one of the times that they did this, they came to him and they challenged him. And it says there in Matthew 9:14 and 15, it says John's disciples, okay, in this case, John's disciples, they came and they asked him how it is that we and the Pharisees, those religious people out there, fast often, but your disciples do not fast. Now Jesus answered and he says, how can the guest of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? The time will be when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. So John's disciples, John the Baptist, they were not with Jesus in the same kind of way. They were looking forward to the Messiah. And so when they asked, they were in a situation where fasting would be appropriate. They were seeking God with all of their hearts. Now, fasting is very often associated in the Bible with a time of diligent seeking, a time of humbling ourselves, a time of desperate need, and sometimes even a time of mourning. But Jesus, he doesn't condemn them for their fasting. He doesn't say anything bad about them. What he actually says to them is, these people, you're asking, why are they not fasting? They are now in the time of celebration. They are now in that mountaintop experience, if you will. They are together with God and or with the Lord. And when we say this, this is actually a recognition of our good times and also our bad times. So we talk about many times the mountaintop experience. Now, when I was younger, we used to go to church camp, and a lot of times we would talk about having a mountaintop experience in the church camp. It wasn't literal because there weren't really any mountains around where I grew up. Maybe we had some hills. What we were talking about was we were dedicated during that time of church camp to seeking God, to praying, to praising God, and we entered into those times where we felt very uplifted by God. That's what we came there for. This was our time of celebration. Okay? So we do have the mountaintop spiritually. We also have times in our life when things are going well, when we have that mountaintop otherwise, when things are comfortable for us. Now, not all of life is that way, but Jesus recognizes that life is going, your behavior is going to be a little bit different in the mountaintop experiences from what it is in your time of difficulty. He doesn't condemn that necessarily, but what we are reminded to do from the book of Deuteronomy and elsewhere in the Bible is when we enter that time of satisfaction, maybe if it's a spiritual mountaintop, we're not going to need to be reminded so much because that is a time when we feel really close to God. But even in those times when everything is going good for us, we need to remember God. Now, sometimes we can get into our secular job, into the worldly pursuits, and this is what actually distracts us from God. Now, I've spent the last 30 years in technical fields, so in computer science and in data science. Sometimes I need to stop and remember, you know what? God knows how to do computer science. God knows how to do data science. And sometimes I have to remember that just because I'm frustrated. You know, we talk about being so frustrated you pull your hair out. You ever wonder why I'm bald? Well, anyway, sometimes I have to remember that because I'm frustrated. Excuse me. So, and we see this too, like in the book of Acts, when Paul was being taken back to Rome, and on board the ship gets caught in a hurricane. And so the people have worked themselves to exhaustion. And Paul comes out and he tells them that it's not going to result in a loss of their life, but only the ship. Okay? In times like that, we need to realize God knows how to sail a ship. And that's the way that I heard it originally. God knows how to sail a ship. Not only does he know how to sail a ship, he knows how to guide a hurricane. Okay, and that's what was driving the ship to begin with. So all of these challenges and all of these things that we work on, when we get good at it, when we start to stand out among our peers, when our peers start to give us praise and start to tell us how good we are, rather than letting our heart become puffed up, we need to realize who gave us the ability to be able to do that? Who gave us the ability to stand out? And you know what? Am I really that special? Because however good I think I am, God is still better at it. Okay? Whatever it is that I'm looking at, whatever it is that I'm doing. And so, when things are going well for us, we look in our heart, we can start to feel proud, but at that point too, we need to remember God who has brought us up, remember God who has given us the ability, remember God who has led us to that place, even to the places where we are comfortable. So remember God in good times. Good times call for thanksgiving, for joy, and for remembrance. So when we have the good times, we're not called to mourn. We're not called to shun the good times. We should enjoy them. We should take joy in these times. But when we take joy, we should remember it is God who has brought us to this place. The danger then is forgetting God when life is easy. But faith remembers the one who raised us and who delivered us. And this is really what we're talking about when we get into Psalms 103. I want to read this in English again. And Luz, you're doing well with our Spanish reading. I'm going to give it to you to read the Spanish too. It says in the first 3 verses, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Give thanks to the God of gods. His love endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord of lords. His love endures forever."
Den gracias al Señor porque Él es bueno. Su gran amor perdura para siempre. Den gracias al Dios de dioses. Su gran amor perdura para siempre. Den gracias al Señor de señores, su amor perdura para siempre.
And you know, this is a really unique psalm because as you read it, every verse ends in, for his love endures forever. If you back up and you look at the themes from the beginning of Psalms 103 to the end, you could probably pull some themes out of the different parts of the scriptures. And there's probably more than one way to divide it. But as I looked at it, these were the themes that I got out of it. So if we look at the beginning, it says, God is our creator. His love endures forever. God is our deliverer. His love endures forever. God is our sustainer. His love endures forever. God brought us up from Egypt. His love endures forever. God delivered us from the Pharaoh and the Red Sea. His love endures forever. God brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey. His love endures forever. Now, this is literal for Moses' generation. This is a metaphor for our lives as well. When we look back, we realize God, our creator, okay, literal there. Deliverer, what is it that we have been delivered from? We haven't probably come up from Egypt, but what is that dark place in our life that has held us down, that has held us back? Okay, the Pharaoh, that king of darkness that holds us down, that holds us back. God has brought us up into a place of plenty. And in all of these things, we remember him, for his love endures forever. So, what does God call us to do? He doesn't call us to mourn constantly. No. He doesn't call us to constantly be in a place where we feel like we cannot enjoy something. No. God recognizes we have good times in our life as well as bad times. He does encourage us to call on him in those difficult times, even in the foxhole, when we find ourselves in the foxhole. Yes, we are going to call on God during those times. But when we come up out of there, when we come into that place of celebration in our lives, it's not a time to forget God. It's not a time, well, we can celebrate, but it's not a time to celebrate in such a way that we forget God. It's not a time for us to be proud and say, look at what I've done. It is a time for us to remember God and to remember that, as the psalm says, his love endures forever. It is he who has raised us up. It's he who has delivered us. It's he who sustains us. His love endures forever. And so, to the one whose love endures forever, we say, we will remember you in the times that are good, in the times that are bad, because you are our God.